Man, oh man, there's just so much I want to talk about, so much I want to cover, so much that I'm not even sure just if it's even possible anyone can really cover it all. Because this is something that's been over a decade in the making, right? This is something that's probably been in the cards since the very beginning, like the very beginning of J.K. Rowling's celebrity. There is just so much, so much to talk about when it comes to this situation. And a lot of people, I think, are kind of, I don't know, focusing too much on current events when it involves Joe and just what she's doing and things like that. Because when you get right down to it, what she's doing now has been kind of a problem since before Harry Potter was even finished. Since like I don't know, so since very inception, I would say her virtue signaling has been kind of an issue and kind of a major boat anchor around this franchise, right? In that, like, a lot of her social justice sort of ideas don't really work. And back in the day, it didn't really matter, right? Because this was before social justice warriorism was a problem. This was before virtue signaling had like the sort of stigma it does now. This was before the story was finished. Because back in the day, I was more than willing, for whatever reason, to overlook this kind of thing in favor of praising what Harry Potter does well. Like, it is, of course, a fun little book series that I still enjoy, with likable, memorable characters. You like a well-rounded plot. Like, there's nothing wrong fundamentally with the original Harry Potter books, right? They are fun to read. There is nothing wrong with that in and of itself, right? But as time has gone on, as Joe continues to try and release more material to expand the universe and do more things with the license and things along those lines, like, it becomes more and more apparent to me that her interest is not necessarily in making a new interesting story, right? Like, to me, at this point, when it involves Harry Potter, like, all of her major announcements always seem like they have some underlying agenda to them, and that's not always social justice related, right? Like that recent extremely controversial claim about the bathroom, the one I made an entire video about. Well, that wasn't the entire topic of the video. The one that everybody knows, right? The one that that made everyone stop and say that, like, well, J.K. Rowling has really lost it. It involved the books, right? It involved a certain element of the books that a lot of people have been, bringing up and addressing. It involved like the situation how Salazar Slytherin managed to hide the Chamber of Secrets in a bathroom before the plumbing was installed. Modern plumbing was installed in a wizard castle, right? Like, that seems kind of weird, right? That wizards would have like a functional bathroom like 1,000 years ago. And I said this in my video that, like, there were probably all sorts of explanations. Like, there was a progression towards where the chamber was. Like, maybe uh, it was like a classical Roman bathroom at first, and then uh, and then as time went on, like, they built the modern bathroom over it, and like someone other than Salazar sort of found the chamber, and like there is all sorts of things you could have done to like explain it, or you could have not explained it at all. It's one of those things that doesn't really need to be explained because it sort of goes against what makes the idea interesting to begin with. Because like, who would have thought the Chamber of Secrets would have been in a bathroom, right? Like, that in and of itself was a fun idea, a fun enough idea. Like, there are questions regarding that and how that happened and why that's relevant. But again, it make the fact that that was the case made it like an interesting thing to talk about. It made for a fun story. Like, it made it a memorable sort of situation, right? Like, the Chamber of Secrets is actually probably my favorite Harry Potter movie because it leads to like such an interesting, scary atmosphere. Like very out of place in like a kids movie. I think very very well done. Um, because of this like sort of like larger than life sort of situation regarding the school, right? More scary to me than like a than Sirius Black was, because like you know who Sirius Black is, you know what he's trying to do. Like something about the ideology of the Chamber of Secrets and just what it was about, and just like who was involved and stuff like that. Like it's probably my least favorite book, but the idea behind it is so scary to me, and I think a lot of people really appreciated it for that reason, right? It did not need. Everyone said this. It did not need to be explained. Like it seemed to me that explaining the whole why it was in a bathroom thing, I don't know. It just felt flat. It was just kind of pointless. It was just kind of a poorly thought out, and it just felt like an attempt to resolve a plot hole that to get people to stop referring to this thing as a plot hole. Like like it just feels like it's addressing complaints from people who didn't really appreciate the core story, the original story, right? Because that's what I think Joe is doing when it comes to this, like these retcons and just these weird changes to the lore, and just from the very beginning, it's always felt that way. It's that she's addressing complaints regarding the franchise and just how it's structured and just what happens in it and just what the characters are like and things like that, because I've noticed a lot is that she's very very willing to change things in order to please people, right? So the biggest example that comes to my mind, other than like the whole Dumbledore thing, which we are going to talk about, is the whole Ron and Hermione thing, where they are a thing, and fans did not care for that. There is a very vocal section of the fans, people who like the series, that like think that Ron and Hermione do not go together. They think they're like too malicious. They think they're like too much of a bickering old couple right from the beginning. They think that like it's not a good pairing for Hermione, right? Because Hermione's like super popular. Ron has this like very dedicated fan base that hate him because of like all these times where he sort of does like stuff that's questionable and like maybe isn't always like the best friend and things like that. Like people take that personally, right? It just goes to show you how invested people are in these characters. They think about these things, but whatever. And since then, since the ending where Ron and Hermione got together, like Joe has apologized for them getting together and says that like, maybe they wouldn't be a good couple. And personally, I think that's a major mistake because I think there is a reason Joe wanted them to be together to begin with, right? Like she had this idea and she just sort of failed to really sell people on it, right? She did not emphasize why Ron was right for Hermione, why she liked him, why she, chose Crumb over him, so to speak. like any of that, you know? Like she did not emphasize their relationship, and that's fine. That's like so that was something that was oversight. I would say one of the major flaws of the books is that it sort of doesn't really explain why the relationships play out the way they do, like especially among the main cast, like Harry, Hermione, Ron, like why do they marry the people they do? Like what is their relate? Like it's kind of just glazed over, and that's sort of a complaint I had from the beginning. One of the things that the Cormoran Strike books do, her new thing is that like it emphasizes the relationship way more, and it's sort of way more interesting because of that. Uh, in fact, I would kind of say it's kind of jumped to the opposite extreme at this point, where she's sort of like emphasizing the relationship over the actual core plot. So it is like something she needs to like think about and work on and things along those lines, right? When it comes to this sort of thing, but you don't need to like apologize to fans for the way things turned out, right? You don't need to like backtrack and like say that like maybe they have a point. Like you don't need to suggest that maybe Ron and Hermione aren't meant for each other. Like you don't like that. That clearly wasn't what you were going for. So I don't know. Like that to me is what Joe should have emphasized with Harry Potter going forward. Is that like, stick to the school setting, but focus on something else. Focus on Ron and Hermione's relationship, maybe. Like talk about, make it a love story, make it about like how they fell in love with each other, make it interesting, make it like something that people were not expecting to see, right? And that's sort of what she did with Fantastic Beasts. She like went back in the timeline. She went back to when Dumbledore was a young man. She went back to like this World War II era, pre-World War II era, where they're like, the culture was different, the world was different. Like things were building up to this like duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. There was all this stuff, that was hinted at during the lore, regarding this. Like that initially seemed really interesting to me. I had high hopes for the Fantastic Beast movies, and I still have not seen any of them because of all the bullshit that surrounded her since then, right? All of the bullshit that she's been involved with, regarding this specific topic, this specific, part of, the timeline. And that in particular involves Dumbledore, who has increasingly become perhaps the most controversial character in the series. There was always this very vocal minority of people. Uh, there was always this group of people online, right, who always did not quite understand why Dumbledore uh, was such an offhanded mentor, right? They did not understand why Dumbledore was going around doing the things he did, sort of doing this really hands-off, sort of almost manipulative approach to like mentoring and doing that sort of thing, like stuff like leave like allowing Harry to go into the go find the Philosopher's Stone, right? Like he clearly knew what was going on, right? He clearly had some sort of idea that they were like asking questions about it and didn't really do anything. Like people were that seemed kind of shady, right? So it's had this sort of interpretation where he's sort of manipulative, sort of like out there, sort of like not doing the right thing, right? Where you have why does he send Harry back to the Dursleys every year, like that sort of thing, right? Like there was always this sort of weird weird backlash towards Dumbledore, right? And as time has gone on, it's become like it's grown more and more and more to the point where it's honestly feeling like a massive issue with the Fantastic Beast movies, right? Where Joe is trying in an attempt to make the series seem more progressive than it actually is. Joe is now pretending that Dumbledore is gay. Now, I say pretending. I do say pretending because that was clearly not part of the original books. In fact, you can sort of see a timeline where Joe thought she could get away with this and sort of like started like teasing it in interviews and stuff like that. And it was not something she had in mind from the beginning, and it's not something. And that's not something that grew naturally into the character because when the books were over, when like everything was said and done, when everything was finished, like no one had this impression that Dumbledore and Grindelwald fuck. In fact, at the beginning, when she first made that statement, I thought it was ridiculous. Like I thought that it was just I thought about it a lot. I did. I like tried to think, tried to ration it out, tried to realize it, and I decided that it eventually that it was indeed ridiculous, and that Joe sort of was again, I'm like summarizing like several years worth of like opinions here, but eventually I decided that Joe was simply trying to virtues. It was something. It was probably my first encounter with a celebrity trying to virtue signal because at the time. A lot of criticism was being lobbied at Harry Potter for not being progressive enough. Like all the characters were lined up in neat little heterosexual roles. Like where are the gay characters? Where are these characters? Where are these like LGBT characters, right? So Joe decided to make Dumbledore gay for Grindelwald, which makes absolutely no sense. None at all. Wizard Hitler had a sexual relationship with Dumbledore. Like it wasn't like political. It wasn't like people, meeting someone for the first time and like of similar intelligence, of interest of as you, and like sharing all these crazy ideas, like thinking about like how to change society, how to change the world. Like no, they just wanted to fuck, and to me that just really cheapened the whole thing. It just cheapened the whole relationship between the characters, and it didn't even really make a whole lot of sense to me, because uh, it wasn't something it, this is how I remember now. I remember how I rationed it out. I remember why I did not believe this was the case. Because Rita Skeeter, the propagandist, sort of, journalist cunt, right? That stupid bitch who goes around making lies about it, like exaggerating everything, that sort of person did not once emphasize this fact in her tell-all book about Dumbledore, including her inside source with Mathilda Bagshot, the Grindelwald's great aunt, who had like, who knew what they were like, who knew what they were doing, who understood all this. Like there was never any hint that it was a sexual relationship. And that's why I say it is something that Joe came up with later to try and appeal to progressives, to try and push onto people, to try and, you know, make it out to be that Dumbledore was gay because it's simply not in the books. Even like progressives, I think this is the main thing that's really getting progressives to turn on her, because I think more conservative people have been kind of angry at her wokeness for years now, but progressives have been turning on her since the movies, because Joe is desperately trying to push this Dumbledore is gay angle onto people, when for one thing it doesn't fit into, because it wasn't, you can't say a character in a book or movie is gay and then it's an important part of his character, and then like not actually show that in the books or movies. Because for the first time in the second Fantastic Beasts movies, The Crime of Grindelwald, like that was the one, that was the angle that both Grindelwald and Dumbledore are in it, right? They're together, they have like a scene together, and yet still to this day, no one has any idea. No one feels that that they ever had a relationship. Like it seems like Joe has just failed to really make this to incorporate this into the lore. Like it's just something I think she introduced to try and for wokeness points and try to appeal to this certain demographic, but it's just backfiring. It really is. Like Joe constantly tries to incorporate these things, right? Like the house elf liberations, like the muggle, the way the muggle boards are treated, like Dumbledore being like, she tries incorporating all these really progressive sort of like angled ideas, and a lot of them don't really make a whole lot of sense. They're not incorporated very well. They're not in focus, and it's just something that I'm beginning to notice as I get older. Right? Is that like I don't really have patience for this kind of thing. I just don't. Like I don't know. I think, like, for example, why does she insist that like magic isn't genetic? Like, it clearly is, right? It's clearly like a familial thing. Like, most people, most magical families do indeed have magical children. Like, most do. Like, there are squibs. Like, it is an established concept that like it is sometimes something that happens, right? But generally speaking, muggles have muggle children, and magical people have magical like it's just a general trend that you notice as things go on, right? Like it's just she it just feels like a this whole uh angle that like Voldemort hates the Mudbloods. He wants to kill them all. Like it just feels really forced, right? Like it doesn't feel like that's the actual overall goal of the character. Like he just feels like he wants to take over. Like it just feels like he's sort of appealing to this group of like hateful people, right? Who want to help him, create this new world order, right? It doesn't feel like something Voldemort himself wants to do, like deeply believes, right? Because he himself is like, the son of a Muggle man, right? That's how I. It's just like that, right? Things like that. Like there's this sequence in the Order of the Phoenix, my favorite book in the series, that has this really strange line, from Dumbledore, where he goes out of his way to like emphasize that, like, we're mistreating the magical creatures of the world. Like, what did anything that happened in that book have to do with like house elves or like they're not even that relevant. Like, everything we see from the centaurs in that book imply that they're fucking insane. Like they cannot handle one of their own going to teach at a fucking school, and they like freak the fuck out and like start raping people. It's just ridiculous, right? Like what did like anyone do to the centaurs in that fucking book? Like next to nothing. Like Umbridge was a fucking racist, right? But I don't know, right? Like she kind of deserved it. She kind of had it coming. It's just, uh, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just one of those things, right? It's one of those situations where I think people are losing respect for a celebrity they used to really, really like and appreciate, right? Like Joe used to be this like massive overnight success story, right? She was like known to be poor. She came out of nothing to become like this multi-millionaire because of Harry Potter, because of everything she's done since then. She did such a great job, like help, like trying promoting herself as this sort of rags to riches story, but I think a lot of it is starting to crack, like show its cracks, right? Like she can't really hide behind her once poverty, like the fact that she was once in poverty anymore. She's been quite wealthy for a long, long time, like long before the books were even finished, right? Like I would say by the time the fourth book came out, she was a millionaire. She met her husband around that time, I think, uh, who is not as wealthy as she is, but yeah. Since then, like it's just been, this downward spiral of just this sort of bullshit, when it comes to how she's handling things and what she's doing and just how she handles her personal life. And I think that's the main thing because the original books are still good, right? People still like the original books. It has nothing to do with that. It's everything she's doing now, everything she's doing politically, everything she's doing on Twitter, especially. That's really, really, really putting me off her, right? That's really making me critical of her and really, really kind of hate her. Like, I cannot follow her on Twitter because of the disgusting shit she puts up on there on a regular basis, right? Like, again, I don't think this is a political thing. I think she just has genuinely disgusting opinions. When she goes on there and like compares politicians to characters in her books, it's just kind of embarrassing, right? Like hearing her like go on there and like attack Trump for being like, oh, this is like something Voldemort would do. Like that's so obnoxious. It's so righteous. It's so like uh, it's like she's patting herself on the back, like, "Oh, look at me! I predicted pure evil in the form of Donald Trump." Like, it's just so ridiculous, right? Um, and so hypocrite, like especially since she like praises Hillary Clinton of all people, who's like the example, like who is like a one-to-one example of what Dolores Umbridge would be like in real life. Like it's so ridiculous how like blind she is to like how people view that situation. It just uh I don't know. There were so many times during like the debates in 2016 where like I was expecting her to be like, "I will have order." Just no. I was not. I was not impressed. I was not impressed with like her political talk back in the day, especially since she's not American. Like I will never understand these like limey motherfuckers who will come out here and like talk shit about American politics. Like why do you need guns? We don't have guns over here in the UK. Just unfucking believable. I don't I don't know. Like Joe needs to stop. Okay, she needs to stop using Twitter. She needs to stop virtue signaling. She needs to stop pushing herself up, putting herself out there in this regard, and she needs to stop focusing primarily on the virtue signaling because I think that's been the main problem since Fantastic Beasts started, right? Is that it's become less about the plot and more about like justifying virtue, but justifying her bullshit, right? Her bullshit retcons, right? Justifying this big thing that she's been pushing for years, desperately trying to convince people that Dumbledore was gay, which clearly isn't the case. If you stop to think about it at all, like clearly something she decided after she broke the books. Like she would not have had to announce it in an interview if it was in any way canon, right? Like it would have been self-evident by the books, and like that just never happened. Like there's just nothing there that really, really would really support such a thing, I think. And yeah, that's the current state of J.K. Rowling. She is clearly in decline. She is clearly losing her relevancy. She's not some hot new thing anymore. She is just some celebrity trying to appeal to this social justice warrior demographic. She is someone that is increasingly alienating her vast and diverse fan base in order to appeal to a select few. That is the current state of J.K. Rowling.